percent literally means to divide by 100. Most of your percent problems will involve changing a decimal or a fraction into a percent, or changing a percent into a decimal or fraction. To convert a decimal into a percent, you can simply multiply the decimal number by 100, which is the equivalent of moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So 0.56 as a decimal is equal to 56%. And 0.001 as a percent is, well, I'm going to move my decimal 2 positions to the right, and I still get 0.1, and then I add my percent. There are generally 2 ways you can convert a fraction into a percent. If you have a calculator or you're good at long division, you could simply rewrite this fraction as 4 divided by 5. And then you would simply do the long division. 5 goes into 4 0 times. I add my decimal point. I add a 0 to my 4 to make that 40. And then 5 goes into 40 8 times. So 4 divided by 5 is 0.8. To convert that to a percent, I'm going to move my decimal 2 positions to the right. So I get 1, 2, add a 0, and I have 80%. The other way involves changing the denominator in your fraction into 100. So in this case, I could multiply both the top and the bottom of my fraction by 20. Since I'm multiplying the top and the bottom by the same number, that's really the equivalent of multiplying the fraction by the number 1, which really doesn't change the value. So then I say 20 times 4, that's going to give me 80, over 20 times 5, or 100. Since the word percent literally means to divide by 100, 80 divided by 100 is the exact same thing as 80%. When you're asked to calculate percent greater than and less than, you want to take the percent you're solving for, which in this case is 25%, and either add that or subtract that from 100. If you're solving for percent greater than, take your percent and add it to 100%. In other words, 25% greater than is the same thing as 125% times something else. In this case, it's 40. Since 125% literally means 125 divided by 100, I could rewrite 125% as a fraction, and then it simplifies down to 5 over 4. Now I can work on translating my question into an equation, and I'm going to go straight down the line translating word for word and phrase for phrase into math symbols. What number? That's my variable. I'll call that y. Is? That's my equal sign. 25% greater than, we already established that is the same thing as 5 over 4. And the than, that means I'm going to multiply 5 over 4 times 40. And that's my final equation. What number, y, is 5/4 times 40? Or y is equal to 200 divided by 4, which is equal to 50. With a percent less than question, I'm going to follow a very similar procedure, but instead of adding my 90 to 100, I'm going to subtract 90 from 100. So 90% less than is the same thing as 10% times. So I could rewrite the question using math symbols. What number? That's my variable. We'll call that y. Is? That's my equal sign. 90% less than, that's the same thing as 10% times, and then 180 stays the same. Now we just solve for y, and I'm going to translate my 10% into a fraction. So my new equation is y is equal to 10 over 100 times 180, which is equal to 1800 over 100. My zeros cancel out, and I'm left with y is equal to 18. With percent increase and percent decrease questions, you have to use a very specific formula, and that formula can be summarized as change over original. When you're talking about a percent increase, you're going from a low number to a high number. So your original number is the lower of the two numbers. However, if you're talking about a percent decrease, You start high, and then you go low. So in a percent decrease, the higher number is the original number. So in this case, we're going from 100 to 125. The change is just 125 minus 100, and we're going to put that over the original number of 100. And we could rewrite that as 25 over 100, which is the same thing as 25%. And the fact that going from 100 to 125 was a 25% increase, that might have seemed pretty obvious. However, watch what happens when we go in the opposite direction. Now we're going to use a percent decrease using the same numbers. We still use the same equation of change over original. My change is still 25, but this time, because I'm going from a high number to a low number, my original is the 125. So my formula for percent decrease is 25 over 125. If I divide both top and bottom by 25, that fraction reduces down to 1 over 5. And then to convert that into a percent, I want my denominator to be 100. So I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 20. So my next fraction becomes 20 over 100, which is the same thing as 20%. Really watch out for percent increase and percent decrease questions on your exam. They're very easy to get backwards. The trap answer on this kind of question would be to assume that going from 125 to 100 is a 25% decrease, because it was so easy to see that going from 100 to 125 is a 25% increase. But don't forget to use your equation of change over original.